People often ask how I lost my entire family in a single night. I tell them the truth starts with a bill I didn't pay. After I refused to pay for my sister's $85,000 wedding, she invited me to a penthouse dinner. My family was waiting with a contract. She said, "Sign this or I'll ruin you," and I said, "Meet my husband." What he showed them shut everything down. But before the end, there was the beginning. It started at the Langham, with a brunch bill nobody else reached for. I stood in the center of the private dining room, clutching a check for $400 while my hands turned ice cold. Across the white linen tablecloth, my younger sister, Jenny, didn't reach for her wallet. Instead, she slid a heavy, glossy brochure toward me. It landed next to my untouched mimosa with a soft, expensive thud. I looked down at the gold lettering. The Sterling Chateau, the most exclusive venue in Chicago. The silence in the room wasn't peaceful, it was heavy, suffocating, and waiting for my money. The venue fee went up, Jenny said, not asking. Just stating it like a weather report. She picked at a loose thread on her sleeve, bored by the inevitable transaction. "I need you to cover the difference by Monday, or we lose the date and the family loses face." $85,000. She said the number without blinking, without a please, without even looking up from her phone. It was pure, unadulterated entitlement, distilled into a single demand. She truly believed my bank account was her birthright. I looked at the brochure, then at Jenny's perfect, porcelain face. I simply slid my hand into my purse, located my wallet, and snapped it shut. No. The word hung in the air, absolute and terrifying. Jenny's smile didn't just fade, it shattered into something feral. Her eyes narrowed, shifting instantly from doting sister to cornered animal. "If you walk out that door," she hissed, voice dropping to a venomous whisper, "I'm going to tell your clients about Grandma's missing emeralds." I froze, my hand hovering over my chair. That accusation could end my career as a crisis manager, and she knew it. I didn't wait to hear the rest. I turned and walked out, leaving her with the bill and her delusions. But the war wasn't over, it had just begun in the lobby. My parents, Cynthia and Ronald, were waiting by the concierge desk, like sentries at the gates of hell. They weren't checking in. They were standing side by side, arms crossed, wearing matching expressions of disappointed patience usually reserved for a misbehaving toddler. "We saw you storm out," my mother said, stepping into my path to pick imaginary lint off my coat. "You're causing a scene, Elizabeth. Go back in there and fix it." She didn't ask what Jenny threatened. She didn't care about the extortion. She only cared that the ATM had stopped dispensing cash. I looked at them, really looked at them, and saw only strangers in expensive suits. I walked past them into the biting Chicago wind, realizing my hands were shaking because I finally understood I had no family. My apartment was quiet, but not the empty, lonely quiet my mother always assumed I lived in. It was the deliberate, heavy silence of a steel vault. I locked the door behind me, threw my coat on the hook, and walked straight to the office at the back of the hallway. Logan was already there, sitting in the dark. The blue light of 3 monitors illuminated the sharp angles of his face, casting long shadows against the bookshelves. He didn't turn around when I entered. He just tapped a final key and spun his chair. "They cornered you," he said, and it wasn't a question. It was a statement of fact read from the tension in my shoulders. It's worse than that, I replied, leaning against the door frame to keep my knees from buckling. Jenny wants 85 grand for the wedding venue. When I said no, she threatened to go nuclear. She is going to tell my clients I stole grandma's emeralds. The words tasted like ash in my mouth. I waited for his anger, but Logan just went completely still. In the 2 years we had been secretly married, I had learned to read his stillness. It wasn't hesitation, it was the safety on a weapon being clicked off. The emeralds, he repeated, his voice dangerously low. The ones that went missing 3 years ago, because Jenny left the safe open. The same, I said. But truth doesn't matter in my industry, Logan, perception does. If she emails Marcus Sterling, or the board at Horizon Tech, I am finished. I manage crisis for billionaires. I can't be one. I walked over to the window, staring out at the gray Chicago skyline. The snow was starting to fall again, blurring the city lights into smeared watercolor streaks. I have to pay her, I whispered, hating the sound of my own surrender. If I don't, she burns my career to the ground. It is the perfect leverage. It would be, Logan said. The sound of his chair scraping against the hardwood, cutting through my panic. If she wasn't already drowning. I turned around slowly. What? Logan didn't answer with words. He gestured to the monitors. I walked around the desk and looked. I didn't see a resume, or a bio explaining that my husband used to hunt cyber terrorists before he went private. I just saw the results. The screen was a waterfall of raw data. Social media metadata, geotags, spending habits, and encrypted chat logs. It was a digital autopsy of my sister's life. I've been monitoring their digital exhaust since the engagement party, he said. Call it husbandly instinct. I flagged a spending anomaly on the venue deposit last week, Logan continued. His fingers flying across the backlit keyboard. She said Travis paid for it. I shook my head, confused by the shift in focus. I said Travis is broke. Logan corrected me immediately. His credit score is lower than the temperature outside. He couldn't finance a pizza, let alone a castle. He hit enter and a new window popped up. It was a timeline of transactions, with red flags scattered like landmines. Jenny didn't pay the deposit with Travis's money, Elizabeth, and she didn't pay it with hers. Then whose money is it? I asked. Logan looked up at me, and for the first time, I saw something other than anger in his eyes. I saw protection. Fierce, terrifying protection. You need to sit down, he said softly. You think she needs $85,000 for a venue, Elizabeth? She needs it to cover the interest on the debt she already put in your name. Logan didn't wait for my confusion to settle. He hit a command key, and the living room wall turned stark white as the portable projector hummed to life. There was no loading screen, just the brutal, glowing reality of my financial autopsy projected 6 feet high. Look at the dates, Logan said, his voice devoid of emotion. He wasn't looking at the wall. He was watching my face crumble. I stepped closer to the projection, shielding my eyes against the glare. It was my Experian credit report. At the top, my credit score, usually a pristine 800, was bleeding out at 540. Below it sat a list of inquiries and open accounts that made my stomach turn over. Chase Sapphire Reserve, opened 4 months ago. Balance, $28,400 past due, Logan read aloud, pointing a laser at the line item. I don't have a Chase Sapphire, I whispered, my voice cracking. You do now, he countered. And you also have an Amex Platinum, opened 2 months ago, balance 42,000. He scrolled down to the bottom of the list. A Neiman Marcus store card was maxed out at 15 grand. I did the math in my head, the numbers blurring through the rising panic. That was nearly $90,000 of debt, attached to my name, my social security number, and my life. How? I asked, leaning against the desk for support. How did she get past the verification? The two-factor authentication. She didn't need to, Logan said, clicking to the next slide. It was a scanned copy of a lease application. She used your old passport ID. The one you thought you lost at Mom's house last Christmas. And a burner phone registered in your name. She routed the mail to a P.O. box in Schaumburg. He magnified the signature at the bottom of the lease. It was my name. It looked exactly like my handwriting. It was a forgery so practiced, so intimate, it made my skin crawl. This wasn't just theft. It was a violation of my existence. The Astor Street penthouse, I read aloud. $12,000 a month. She has been living there for 3 months, Logan said. She told the family she got a promotion and a deal from a friend. The reality is that you are the guarantor. If she misses a payment, they don't evict her. They sue you. I stared at the wall as the pieces of the last few months slammed into place. The sudden wardrobe upgrade. The refusal to let anyone visit until it was fully furnished. She hadn't just borrowed money. She had hollowed me out and worn my financial identity like a costume. This isn't a family dispute, I said, the shock finally hardening into a cold, jagged rage. This is a federal crime. Identity theft, wire fraud, forgery. 15 years minimum. If we press charges, Logan said. He turned off the projector, plunging the room back into shadow. The silence that followed was heavy, suffocating, and absolutely necessary. She thought I would just pay it. I realized aloud that she is extorting me for $85,000 for the wedding because she knows her house of cards is about to collapse. She needs my cash to cover the minimum payments on my cards before the collections agents start calling my work. It was a Ponzi scheme disguised as family loyalty, and I was the mark. The shock hardened into something colder. This wasn't family anymore. This was a federal crime scene, and I was done being the victim. The rage I expected didn't come. Instead, a cold, clinical numbness washed over me. I stared at the projector's afterimage, connecting dots that shouldn't exist. My parents had visited that penthouse. They had praised Jenny's sudden success, drinking champagne on a balcony, paid for with my credit rating. They had to know on some level. A promotion doesn't buy a Gold Coast view overnight. They chose the lie because the truth was too expensive. They preferred a thief to a daughter. Logan crossed the office, the floorboards creaking under his deliberate steps. He picked up a thick, manila folder from his desk and held it out to me. It felt heavier than 2 years of familial obligation. The police report is filed, he said, his voice steady. Bank fraud affidavits are ready. The penthouse eviction notice is printed. He placed it in my hands. It wasn't just paperwork. It was an amputation kit. I looked down at the stark black ink. I ran my thumb over the sharp edge of the file. If we file this, I said, looking up at him, I have no family. They will never forgive me for sending their golden child to prison. Logan didn't flinch. You haven't had a family for a long time, Elizabeth, he replied, stepping closer. You have had parasites. You have had hostage takers. Real families don't threaten to ruin your career over a venue deposit. He was right. My phone buzzed against the mahogany desk, vibrating like an angry hornet. I glanced at the screen. It was Jenny. The message popped up in a cheerful bubble that belied the felony she was committing. Dinner tonight at the penthouse, 8 o'clock. Mom and Dad are here. Let's smooth things over about the wedding money. It wasn't an invitation, it was a summons. She wanted the check, and she had summoned the executioners to ensure I signed it. It is a trap, I said, sliding the phone toward Logan. They are going to gang up on me. 3 against 1. They think if they get me in that luxury apartment, surrounded by the appearance of wealth, I will feel guilty enough to pay. Or scared enough. Logan read the text, his expression unreadable. They don't know we know, he said. They think you are walking in blind, scared of the emerald story. That gives us the advantage. He looked at me, waiting for the order. I could block the number. I could mail the folder, and never speak to them again. But that wasn't how you killed a monster. That was how you let it hide under the bed. I needed to see their faces when the lights came on. I needed to know they saw me, not as an ATM, but as the storm that leveled their house. We are going, I said. Text her back. Logan picked up the phone. But he didn't type a reply immediately. He looked at the projector still cooling on the desk, then back at me. A small, terrifying smile touched the corner of his mouth. If we are going to dinner, he said, we should bring a housewarming gift. I looked at the device. It was heavy, industrial, and unforgiving. Bring the projector, I said. It would be rude to decline an invitation to an apartment I was technically paying for. The drive to the Gold Coast was a blur of wet asphalt and streetlights smearing against the passenger window. Logan drove with one hand on the wheel, his other resting on the center console, near the evidence folder. He wasn't playing the supportive spouse anymore. He was operating in a mode I hadn't seen since his government days. We didn't listen to the radio. The only sound was the rhythmic thumping of the wipers, fighting the sleet. We were heading into a war zone, dressed for a dinner party. The building rose like a glass needle against the dark sky. An obelisk of wealth that I was unknowingly funding. When we walked into the lobby, the head concierge looked up from his marble station. Good evening, Mrs. Harper, he said, nodding specifically at me with a familiarity that made my stomach lurch. He didn't ask for my ID or buzz the unit. Why would he? In his system, I was the primary tenant. I walked past him, my heels clicking on the floor like ticking clocks. The elevator ride to the 42nd floor felt less like an ascent and more like the loading sequence of a weapon. The mirrored walls reflected us back, me, in a tailored black dress that felt like armor, and Logan carrying the canvas bag containing the projector. He caught my eye in the reflection and gave a nearly imperceptible nod. It wasn't a smile. It was a confirmation that the safety was off. The doors slid open with a soft chime, revealing the penthouse foyer. Jenny opened the door before I could knock. Wearing a strapless designer gown that looked stunning and completely inappropriate for the temperature inside. A blast of frigid air hit me instantly, carrying the scent of expensive perfume and stale anxiety. "The heating is being upgraded," she said quickly, noticing me shiver. "It takes a few days." I knew the truth immediately. Gas gets shut off after 60 days of non-payment. She was freezing to death in a glass box to keep up appearances. I walked into the cavernous living room, ignoring her lie. My parents were sitting on a beige sectional that still had the rental tags tucked underneath the cushions. They were clutching glasses of wine with white, knuckled grips, their postures stiff and unnatural. Dad was wearing his heavy wool blazer indoors, and Mom had draped a cashmere shawl tightly around her shoulders. They looked like actors on a set who had forgotten their lines, but refused to break character. The denial in the room was palpable. "You are late," my mother said, her breath visible as a faint white puff in the cold air. She gestured to the empty coffee table, where a single document sat waiting. "We have been waiting for an hour, Elizabeth. It is rude to keep family waiting when we are trying to help you." Help me. The audacity almost made me laugh. She sat there shivering in an apartment paid for with my stolen identity, criticizing my manners while her golden child prepared to rob me blind. I didn't apologize. I didn't take off my coat. I walked to the center of the room, feeling the cold seep through the soles of my shoes. Jenny closed the door, sealing us in the icebox. Logan stepped up beside me and set the heavy canvas bag on the dining table with a loud, deliberate thud. My father frowned at the noise. "Sit down," he commanded, pointing to a lone wooden chair facing them. They looked like royalty in exile, waiting to behead the messenger. There was no dinner waiting for us. The mahogany dining table was completely bare except for a single, crisp document sitting in the center like a verdict. My stomach tightened. Not from hunger, but from the sheer, breathtaking audacity of the staging. Jenny stood by the floor-to-ceiling window, her arms crossed tightly over her chest to hide her shivering, while my parents watched me with predatory focus. They hadn't invited me here to break bread. They had invited me to sign away my dignity. I pulled the wooden chair out and sat. Jenny didn't waste time with pleasantries or small talk. She walked over and tapped a manicured nail on the paper. "This is a standard personal loan agreement," she said, her voice tight with forced casualness. "It states that you are lending me $85,000 for wedding expenses, to be repaid at a later date. No interest, no fixed term. Just a simple family arrangement to keep the venue secure." She smiled, but it didn't reach her eyes. It was a predator's smile, sharp and utterly devoid of warmth. I picked up the document, the paper feeling cold against my fingertips. I scanned the legal jargon. It was garbage. There was no repayment schedule, no collateral, and a clause that effectively forgave the debt, if not paid within 5 years. "This isn't a loan, Jenny," I said, dropping the page back onto the table. "This is a gift wrapped in legal camouflage, so you don't have to pay taxes on it. You have no intention of paying me back a single cent." The silence stretched thin. My father leaned forward, his leather chair creaking under the shift in weight. He placed his hands on his knees, adopting the tone he used for difficult board meetings. "Do your duty, Elizabeth. You have been blessed with success, while your sister is facing a temporary liquidity issue. It is unseemly for you to hoard wealth when family is in need." He paused, letting the guilt hang in the freezing air. We raised you to be generous. Don't make us ashamed of the woman you have become. My mother chimed in, her voice softening into a practiced wheedle that made my skin crawl. Honey, it is just money. You can make more next month. Jenny has a vision for her special day, and you are the only one standing in the way of her happiness. She reached out to touch my hand, but I pulled away before she could make contact. You are being selfish, she whispered, the mask slipping just enough to show the resentment underneath. Stop punishing your sister for being delicate. Jenny's patience snapped like a dry twig in winter. She slammed her hand on the table, making the document jump. Enough with the lecture, Mom. She knows what is at stake. She turned to me, her eyes wild with desperation. You sign that paper right now, Elizabeth, or I send the email. I have the draft saved on my phone. One click, and every client you have knows you are a thief who stole Grandma's emeralds. I will ruin your reputation so thoroughly you won't get hired to manage a lemonade stand. I looked at them, taking in the tableau of dysfunction. My father, the enforcer, my mother, the guilt tripper, and Jenny, the executioner. They truly believed they held all the cards. They thought my silence was fear, not the quiet accumulation of evidence. I glanced at Logan, who was leaning against the wall by the light switch, his face impassive. He gave me a barely perceptible nod. He was ready. I turned back to my sister, keeping my voice level and calm. So that is the arrangement, I said, ensuring my voice carried clearly in the empty room. I pay you $85,000 for a wedding venue, or you falsely accuse me of grand larceny to destroy my livelihood. There is no middle ground. No negotiation. I wanted them to say it. I needed them to own the extortion explicitly. My father sighed, checking his watch, as if this were a tedious business transaction. Stop being dramatic, Elizabeth. Just sign the check and we can all go home. I stood up slowly, smoothing the fabric of my dress. The cold air bit at my exposed skin, but I felt strangely overheated. Is this your final offer? I asked, looking from my parents to Jenny. Is this the hill you are all willing to die on? Jenny laughed, a harsh, jagged sound that echoed off the glass walls. It is the only offer, she spat. Sign the paper or I ruin you. There is no third option. She grabbed a pen and shoved it toward me. I didn't take the pen. Instead, I looked at the loan agreement one last time, seeing it not as a contract, but as a confession. You are right, I said softly. We should settle all debts tonight. I turned my head toward the shadows where my husband stood waiting. Logan, set it up. He pushed off the wall and unzipped the canvas bag. I watched them smirk, thinking I was folding. They didn't know I was just clearing the blast radius for what came next. Logan didn't speak. He simply plugged a cable into his laptop and hit a single key. The room was suddenly bathed in the harsh, blue, white light of the projector, drowning out the dim mood lighting of the penthouse. The beam cut through the freezing air, illuminating dust motes, dancing like tiny ghosts before splashing against the cream-colored living room wall. It wasn't a movie. It was a chaotic, bleeding document. My credit report, usually a source of pride, now looked like a crime scene. A collective gasp sucked the air out of the room. Look at the score, I said, my voice cutting through their confusion. 540. That is what happens when someone steals your identity. I pointed to the glowing red lines listing maxed out credit cards. a Chase Sapphire, an Amex Platinum, a Neiman Marcus account. Nearly $90,000 in debt, all opened in the last 4 months, using my social security number. Jenny shifted on her heels, her face pale in the reflected light. That is a mistake, she stammered, looking at our parents for backup. It has to be a glitch. Logan clicked the remote, and the slide changed. The wall now displayed a high-resolution scan of a lease agreement. This apartment, I continued, stepping closer to the projection, so the words projected over my black dress. You told Mom and Dad you got a deal from a friend. The truth is, I am the guarantor. You used my old passport and a forged signature to rent this place. I looked at my father. You are sitting in a stolen apartment, Dad. You are drinking wine in a crime scene. His glass trembled in his hand. My mother stood up, her shawl slipping from her shoulders. This is ridiculous, Elizabeth. You are making a mountain out of a molehill. Maybe she borrowed your information because her credit is a little temporarily overextended. She is your sister. She intended to pay it back. I laughed, a sound devoid of humor. Mom, this isn't borrowing a sweater. This is federal wire fraud and identity theft. I pointed at the signature magnified on the wall. That is a felony. This isn't a family squabble anymore. It is 15 years in prison. The reality of prison snapped Jenny out of her frozen stupor. Her face twisted, losing all traces of the beautiful bride-to-be. You are lying! She screamed, her voice cracking. You are trying to frame me because you are jealous! She fumbled for her phone, her fingers shaking so hard she nearly dropped it. I don't care about your stupid charts. I am sending it. I am sending the email right now. She tapped the screen furiously. Your boss is going to know you are a thief. Say goodbye to your career, Elizabeth. Don't do it, I said. But I didn't move to stop her. I stood perfectly still, watching her destroy herself. Jenny hit the final button with a triumphant, malicious jab. Sent, she announced, breathless and wild-eyed. She held the phone up like a weapon. It is done. Marcus Sterling has the email. The board has the email. You are finished. My mother let out a small sob, finally realizing that the family facade had cracked beyond repair. They waited for me to crumble, to cry, to beg for mercy. The room fell silent, save for the hum of the projector fan. Then, a sharp vibration buzzed from Logan's pocket. He didn't look surprised. He reached into his jacket, pulled out his phone, and glanced at the screen with a bored expression. Actually, Jenny, he said, his voice calm and deep, I think there has been a misunderstanding. He turned the phone around to face them. The email notification was visible on his lock screen. I didn't get fired, I said softly. Because you didn't email my boss. You emailed my husband. Jenny stared at the phone, her mouth opening and closing like a fish out of water. What? She whispered. You said you worked for a holding company, Logan said, stepping forward into the light. I own the holding company. We acquired the Sterling Chateau venue 6 months ago. And I am the majority shareholder of the crisis firm Elizabeth consults for. He tapped his phone screen, deleting her email without reading it. You just tried to blackmail your sister by emailing her husband. You didn't do your research. Logan didn't stop there. He dialed a number on speakerphone. A voice answered on the first ring. Security. The voice crackled. Cancel the reservation for the Harper Miller wedding, Logan ordered, his eyes locked on Jenny. and flag the bride for permanent ban from all properties. Deposit is forfeited due to breach of contract. He hung up. The sound of the call ending was louder than a gunshot. Jenny slid down the wall, her designer dress pooling around her like a shroud. "No," she whimpered. "My wedding. It is gone." The shift in the room was instant and brutal. My parents didn't rush to comfort their crying daughter. They looked at the projector, then at Logan, realizing the money train had just derailed and exploded. "You idiot," my father hissed, turning on Jenny with venomous speed. "You ruined everything." I didn't wait to watch them eat their own. I grabbed my coat and signaled Logan. "We are done here," I said. I walked out of the penthouse, leaving them in the cold with the truth projected on the wall. The fallout was swift and brutal, like a building collapsing into its own footprint. Jenny was evicted 3 days later, her designer clothes packed into black garbage bags by the superintendent. My father didn't call to apologize. Instead, he left a voicemail screaming that I had destroyed the family legacy over a misunderstanding. He still didn't get it. They weren't mourning the loss of a relationship. They were mourning the loss of their safety net. The silence that followed was the sound of a bridge finally burning. We didn't send Jenny to prison, though Logan had the paperwork ready. I chose a different kind of punishment. In exchange for dropping the federal fraud charges, my parents agreed to assume every cent of the debt Jenny had racked up in my name. They liquidated their retirement accounts to pay off the $90,000. It was poetic justice. To keep their golden child out of a jumpsuit, they had to sacrifice the comfort they tried to steal. They finally paid the bill. 2 weeks later, I sat in my own living room. It wasn't a penthouse in the Gold Coast, but it was warm, and the mortgage was paid with money I had actually earned. The snow fell softly outside, no longer looking like a threat. I watched the flakes settle on the windowsill, realizing I hadn't checked my credit score in days. The knot of anxiety that lived in my chest for 30 years was gone. The house was quiet, but it didn't feel lonely anymore. I looked down at the document resting on my lap. It wasn't a bill or a subpoena. It was a decree of name change, stamped with the official court seal. I had decided to drop my maiden name entirely, taking Logan's surname not out of tradition, but out of survival. Being a Harper meant being a resource, a bank account, a victim. That person didn't exist anymore. She had died in that freezing penthouse. The woman sitting here owed nothing to anyone but herself. I picked up my phone and opened the contacts list. I scrolled past colleagues and clients until I reached the group labeled family. There were only 3 names in it: Mom, Dad, Jenny. I didn't hesitate. I didn't feel a pang of guilt or a wave of nostalgia. I selected the group and hit delete. The names vanished from the screen instantly. It was a digital execution of a toxic past. They couldn't call or text me. To me, they were ghosts. Logan walked in, carrying 2 mugs of tea. He saw the empty contact screen and the court document, and he understood. He didn't ask if I was okay. He knew the answer. For years, I believed the lie that I needed their validation to be whole. I thought their love was something I could buy, if I just paid enough. I was wrong. I took the tea, feeling the warmth spread through my hands. I wasn't their daughter anymore. I was just Elizabeth.